Hello and welcome back to Bible Basics. Today we're covering two topics: why as believers we shouldn't seclude ourselves from the outside world, and how a small amount of faith is enough. So welcome to Bible Basics. If it's your first time here, basically I want to start Bible Basics as a resource for new believers or people who didn't know that much about the Bible and were just interested in getting to know the Bible, and also want to encourage you to read your own Bible to form your own opinions and to form your own knowledge of the Bible. A little overview on how these videos work: I give background on the author, I describe the main points and give commentary, and then I read the word and I give some minor commentary. Today we're reading Matthew 13:24 through 42. So Matthew is the author. He's one of the 12 disciples, so he has a first-hand account of Jesus. His intended audience was a Jewish audience to convince him that Jesus was the Messiah. He will quote the Old Testament frequently. In this chapter, Jesus laying down his wisdom through parables, similar to short stories and fables, basically a short story with a message. Today, Jesus is reading two parables. One is the parable of the weeds. Another one is the parable of the mustard seed and yeast. The parable of the weeds. The parable of the weeds, Jesus is describing a farmer who planted wheat, and then in the night, one of his enemies came and planted weeds, essentially not allowing them to grow. His workers come up to him and tell him, hey, someone came and planted weeds. And he's like, do you want us to rip out the weeds so that the wheat can grow? And he tells them, no, let them grow together. And then when it's time to harvest, we'll rip out the weeds. That way we don't harm the wheat now when it's still growing. And basically Jesus explains this as this is what happened in the end times, that there'll be people who are harvested out and they'll be thrown in the fire, and then some who are the intended harvest, which will be the people who go to heaven. So I interpret this as why we as believers should not seclude ourselves from the outside world. What do I mean by this? So let's say you're a new believer who just came to the faith, you just accepted Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, and you're still navigating this world. You might think it's a good idea to leave all your old friends behind, leave your past behind, leave everything, and just go to church and make new friends in church. Now, I'm not against getting away from bad influences. I think if there's bad influences in your life who are causing harm, I think you should absolutely get away from them. But the way I interpreted this is like someone has lost a significant amount of weight and people can notice it. There's a physical change. People ask them how it happened, what they did, how they got into that regiment. I think the same thing can happen in our relationship with God. Let's say you turn your life to God and you're completely changed. You change the way you think, the way you act, everything. Those same people that you were acquaintances with, they'll be the ones who will recognize that change more than anyone. That's why I think it's important to have a balance. I don't think you should have just church friends and just worldly friends, but I think there should be a balance of both. So you can witness to your worldly friends, and if there's any questions they may have, you can answer them and you can kind of tell them about God. Basically, I think you should avoid what I like to call a church bubble. What I mean by that is like, let's say you go to church Friday, Sundays, and Wednesdays, and you're always in church. All your friends are church people, which I think that's great. I think it's good. You should be surrounded with people who believe the same thing, who go to church, and who have the same goal as you. But I think it can kind of be a trap where it's kind of like the Pharisee trap where you think you're holier than everyone just because that's all you're surrounded with. You don't know what people from the outside are dealing with. You don't know what struggles they're dealing with and who are you going to really witness to if all your friends are churchly friends. So I like to think of it as like dieting. There's some foods that you should absolutely stay away from. So those could be your bad influences who are causing you harm. There are certain foods that are healthy for you in moderation as long as you don't eat too much of it. So those are friends that you can still hang around with who aren't causing you harm, who are good people who they would benefit if they knew more about God. There's really good foods for you. So I could compare that to like godly people, those church relationships who they're good for you. You shouldn't eat just that. So as long as they're a balance, I think we'll be okay. But I don't think we should completely seclude ourselves from the outside world. The other parable is the parable of the mustard seed and yeast. In each of these parables, Jesus is saying the same thing. He gives a parable of mustard seed, how even though it's a very small seed, it grows to this very large plant, yields a lot of produce. And then yeast, even though it's a very small ingredient, if you add into bread, it makes the bread rise, activates the bread essentially. And Jesus is saying how even a small amount of faith is enough. So I get it. Times are tough. Things are not going the way you thought they were going to. You're getting opposition from everywhere. You're seeing all these troubles, and I get it. But Jesus is saying, even if you have a small amount of faith, no matter what, you will see the results. And it's not easy to see now, but it will be once you look back at it. Even that small amount of faith that you have right now, that is enough for him to use. So just believe, even though times are tough, even though you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, remain on the path. Jesus can work with that, and he will reward you for it. All right, so now let's read the word. Matthew 24, the parable of the weeds. Jesus told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while everyone was sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. When the wheat sprouted and formed heads, then the weeds also appeared. The owner's servants came to him and said, Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Where then did the weeds come from? An enemy did this, he replied. The servants asked him, Do you want us to go and pull them? No, he answered, because while you are pulling the weeds, you may uproot the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. At that time I will tell the harvesters, First collect the weeds and tie them in bundles to be burned, then gather the wheat and bring it into my barn. Jesus goes on to explain this parable in verse 36, which is what we'll skip to right now. The parable of the weeds explained. Then he left the crowd and went into the house. His disciples came to him and said, "Explain to us the parable of the weeds in the field." He answered, "The one who sowed the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, and the good seed stands for the people of the kingdom. The weeds are the people of the evil one, and the enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of age, and the harvesters are angels. As the weeds are pulled and burned in the fire, so will it be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send out his angels, and they will weed out of his kingdom everything that causes sin and all who do evil. They will throw them into the blazing furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their fathers. Whoever has ears, let them hear." Got to make sure we're not the ones that are thrown in the fire. All right, so now we're going to go back to verse 31, where he talks about the other parable. The parable of the mustard seed and the yeast. He told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and planted in his field. Though it is the smallest of all seeds, yet when it grows, it is the largest of garden plants and becomes a tree, so that the birds come and perch in its branches. He told them still another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed into about 60 pounds of flour until it worked all through the dough. Jesus spoke all these things to the crowd in parables. He did not say anything to them without using a parable. So was fulfilled what was spoken through the prophet. "I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter things hidden since the creation of the world." Again, Jesus is speaking in parables to make it easier for the crowd to understand, and Matthew is quoting the Old Testament to show that Jesus is the Messiah. So we'll stop right there. Next week, we'll finish off Matthew 13. We'll read Matthew 44 through 52, and then we'll finish off next week. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.